Hey everybody, here is the first video of those that I'm going to be posting today. So this video is going to be all about the traits preferred in partners. Now we started talking about this a little bit last time in class, and so the first thing we're going to cover is something we talked about in class, and then we're going to move on to the sex differences between the traits that men prefer. And I have the PowerPoint up. Yeah. So I will pull that up. Here we go. All right. So, remember that both men and women prefer, trustworthy, cooperative, trustworthy traits that are trustworthy mates that are cooperative and agreeable. So both men and women prefer them, but there are fairly reliable sex differences in what men and women prefer. And so we had started talking about some of those differences. So a lot of those differences boil down to whether men want short or long-term relationships. And sexual strategies theory argues that men and women pursue short and long-term relationships for different reasons, and that they each have a different default uh, mating strategy. So, I know a lot of this is review, so I'll just cover it really. So I'll just hit the highlights real quick. Sexual strategies theory argues that we have that we might pursue either a short term relationship or a long term relationship, and that men's default strategy is to pursue a short term mating strategy, largely because they deal with the problem of parental certainty, which simply refers to the fact that they are never 100% certain of their own paternity. They're never 100% certain that they are the father of their children. Whereas women's default strategy is a long-term mating strategy. Again, the theory argues that this is largely due to the fact that women are more parentally invested in their offspring. Or, even if they were, like I mentioned in class, even if they were to abandon them at birth, simply the bearing of the child to term involves more investment than that biologically mandated by the male in the gestation period. And that's true for roughly 95% of mammalian species. So we talked about Trivers' theory of parental investment, how in Trivers' theory of parental investment argues that there we go. That a sex the sex that is most invested in offspring tends to be more discriminating, whereas the sex that is the least invested, they tend to be more competitive with members of the same sex for access to the opposite sex. And so because women are more invested, they should be more discriminating. So they should basically the argument goes that because they're more invested, any copulatory event would potentially take a higher investment from them. So they are faced with this issue of having a higher paternal investment cost. And so for that reason, sexual strategies theory argues that they would prefer long-term strategies. Now, we also see that there is a sexual jealousy difference between males and females. If both men and women both are unhappy when their mates are cheat on them, whether it's emotionally cheat on them or sexually. But when forced to choose which one it would be more upsetting, men tend to choose sexual infidelity as being more upsetting, and women tend to choose emotional infidelity as being upsetting. Now, these differences in mating strategy lead to differences in what people are looking for in their partners. So for men, when they are pursuing a short-term mating strategy because they have the problem of paternal certainty, and they want to maximize their chances of getting successfully procreating. And so they prioritize signs that increase the chances of them successfully doing so. So they look for women who are healthy and who look like they would be able to successfully reproduce. So they tend to prioritize physical attractiveness, signs of youth, and signs of willingness to copulate. So signs, indicators that the person that the woman is connected. But when they are pursuing a long-term mating strategy, they still have the problem of paternal certainty. So they still care about the things that would ensure that they would be the father of their child. But they also add additional things to prevent, all, also in service of maximizing paternal certainty. So if there's any chance that the female might cheat on them, or at least if those chances are high, then their paternal certainty goes down. So even though they know that the female may be able to successfully reproduce, if they're disloyal or likely to cheat, then they may be able to successfully reproduce, there's also a good chance that they may do so with another man. And so when a man ends up going into a long-term mating strategy, not only do they continue to prioritize what they had before or what they cared about before, health and attractiveness, but they also tend to, in addition, care for things like loyalty, fidelity. Now, women, because of their concern with paternal certainty, because they want get the biggest bang for their buck, essentially, the most mate for their investment or their potential investment. When they're pursuing a short-term strategy, they want the biggest bang for their buck. Again, so they want a male who's highly physically attractive. So a man who would have good genes to pass on to the child that she would likely have to invest in heavily. But because women tend to be more invested, females tend to be more invested, they also tend to prioritize prefer long-term mating strategies. And when preferring long-term mating strategies, they tend to add things like the ability to provide resources and the ability to help with childcare. So the traits they tend to prioritize are access to resources, and there are many cues of access to resources. I mean, the most obvious of which is wealth, but not all the time are men who could be good resource providers. Not all the time do they have a lot of wealth at that time, and so they will end up using other cues like dominance, industriousness, and age. Um, Age largely because older men across the lifetime tend to be better able at having or procuring resources than are younger. And this is just to mention something, to remind you of something I said in class. It's one of the interesting differences between sexes in age preferences. Women across their lifespan tend to prefer older men. Men tend to change their age preferences over the course of their life. So younger men, like very younger men, in their teens, they tend to prefer slightly older women. Men in their late teens and 20s, they tend to prefer women about the same age, and men who are older than their 20s tend to prefer younger and younger women. But again, that speaks to the adaptive problems that women face. For women, the adaptive problem is that they need to make sure that they can secure a man who's worth the investment or able to help invest in her and her offspring. Men, their problem is identifying a woman who's able to help them successfully reproduce. So, that's why men's age preferences revolve around the 20s, and women's age preferences are constantly up, meaning women constantly up. So that, my friends, is it for this video. This is again, I was just planning to talk about the traits preferred by men and women. Oh, I guess I shouldn't throw in there that there's also some evidence that women, more so than men, prefer things like humor in their partner and intelligence, but these things aren't as consistent in their sex, aren't consistently found as gender differences. So it's probably safer than anything to say that men and women want humorous and intelligent partners, rather than to say that there's a profound sex difference, although it has been found several times that when it's there, women tend to prefer it women tend to prefer humor in their mates and intelligence in their mates, whereas men tend to not care as much. So when there's a sex difference, that's the general pattern, but that sex difference isn't as that that is it for this video. As always, if you have any questions, let me know. But again, this video was over the traits preferred in potential. That is it for this video. Again, if you have any questions, let me know. Take it easy, everybody.